Thank you, Barbary. For the last lesson, I learned so much on studying authors. In this lesson, we are going to be studying context and setting. With no further ado, Barbary, I'm going to have you take it away.
Great. Well, it's good to be back. And so let's talk about how we move into the next area of English Language Arts class, and that is context and setting. Seems like a logical place to talk about mapping. Want to make a point about context, and it's that contextual and environmental connections to literature and writing give students the little life experience, something to grasp, which is very important. For much of my career, I worked with at-risk students, many inner city students that just had not much left the county borders, let alone traveled and seen other parts of the world or had extensive access to technology and those sorts of things. So important to give them something to hold on to. It's also a great opportunity to introduce cross-curricular elements into English class. So I want to start with GIS for history. This is an excellent website full of great lesson plans, not only created for teachers and for students. So I want to go over there very quickly, and I'm going to go directly into an activity about slavery. And note the picture of Twain there. And we'll pick on old Mark quite a bit throughout, but he offers us so many great examples of how to use this kind of technology, geospatial technologies, to impact our students' learning. So slavery, something that was a part of his life. Note there's an overview, there are documents. I want to go to the map. And so this is a great way to use an online map. And you'll note that as we move through the years, this changes for students. Also note that it's interactive here with, you click on the little piece of paper, and we're going to get an additional document. So it's spinning here for a moment, but you get this idea of, okay, now we can talk about history and force students, give them an experience with making a connection. It's not just about, a dead author and a dusty book. Another great connection are historic maps. Now these historic maps I'm used so often are over in the David Rumsey collection. It's www.davidrumsey.com. You can look things up by time period if you happen to know who created a map, if you know a subject of a map. And I just have an example here. We've been talking about Twain quite a bit. And so this is one of the cool maps that he has there of the Mississippi River. And it's not just what you see on the screen. You can zoom in just as if you had that map laid out on a table and you had the very best magnification and could look at that personally. So you can get that close. The digital images of these maps that he has in his collection are that good. In connection with context, so giving context to literature, we also want to look at setting and analysis. And analysis is that really tough thing to do with kids. It doesn't come naturally to too many students. So I'm going to first pick on a little book called Holes. It's a upper elementary, middle school sort of book. Talks about an interesting geographic feature. It's centered around a camp in a dry lake bed. So there's a history to this place that used to be a thriving lake and people living around it, and so fishing, and you could grow things around the lake, and now it literally is just dry and crusty, and there's this camp for wayward boys that takes place. So where are those places on Earth? I mean, did the guy that wrote the book just make this up? No, he didn't make this up at all. that's a real thing. And in fact, there's a place in Texas, Big Lake, Texas, where they experience a similar phenomenon. The lake kind of comes and goes. And so taking kids to that place. Now I'm showing you there on the screen what that place looks like in ArcGIS, which is a full-blown GIS software program. But let's look at that place over here in our Explorer Online gadget. We'll give the map just a second to come up. So if you want to find this, you would search for Earth, Wind, and Fire, or Earth, or Holes. All of those will get you there. And note that I've got lots of layers here. So let's say maybe I don't want to look at all of these. They're a little distracting, right? So we're going to go just to Twain, and I'd like to zoom in on Big Lake, Texas. And I'm going to click on my dot here. And so now I've got some information about this particular location. So could holes have taken place in Big Lake, Texas? And so we can begin to look at some of those sorts of things. We've also got the Landsat viewer, which lets us look at 3 different views over time. Those of you teaching science, earth science, great opportunity to integrate a story with something happening in science. I used to work very often with the science teacher on my team, and some really great things came from that. Another good story to look at setting, and has some nice science ties to it, is the book Their Eyes Were Watching God. Now very often if you're teaching in an IB curriculum, perhaps an AP class, you may have to deal with this book. An interesting piece by Zora Neale Hurston, and deals with a difficult life in Florida. And so you see the 3 places there. I'm going to go back over here to my map and look at my content, and I actually have that map over here tucked away in one of my folders. You can see I've been busy making maps. I've got lots of maps, have so many that I needed some folders to keep myself straight. So there it is. There's our map. Just going to click on it. Now you can find this just by, you could search for hurricanes, you could search for Their Eyes Are Watching God, any number of those things. You could search for English language arts. That also will get you to the map. And so you can see here, we're looking at the hurricanes, and what I've done is I've pulled out, rather than looking at all of the hurricane data, we're looking at just the hurricanes that might have occurred during the time period of the novel, you know. And so what would it have been like to experience that hurricane as it whipped through? Maybe for some students that live in areas where they understand about hurricanes, you wouldn't have to explain that, but I'm thinking if you live in the middle of the United States, you have really no idea what it's like for the hurricane to be headed straight for you, or to live in a state, and I'm just going to zoom in, and I'm just rolling my mouse here, and it lets me zoom right on in. Look in this time period of this novel, how many hurricanes came through Florida, near Florida, and so that gives us another something to talk about, you know, and to think about, well, why would you be concerned about storms, and how might that affect characters? Again, getting students to think and connect, that's the real power here. Here's another example, and this is a map that, and the activity is actually part of a project that I did worked on with Anita and Roger Palmer, called 20-Minute GIS. And this is aimed at actually an elementary crowd, and it's looking at a piece of poetry. So if we're looking at, and here again I'm going to go back to, let me switch over my map and go back to my content. So this is a poem called Awesome Forces. and quite literally deals with the forces of the earth. But this nice lady has written a poem about it. And so we can talk about, what are the things that make the earth move and shake, and where are the volcanoes and those sorts of things. And again, you'll be able to find this if you just search for poetry, search for earth. You can see down here the tags that we have put in. And so all of these maps have tags. So English language arts, where it applies, earthquakes, volcanoes. We're looking at tectonic plates. So here's another great example of how we can connect some other subject, give a contextual, a setting to something that typically is just a piece of paper and a reading piece. Having kids do some analysis in terms of looking at plates. So we could have them say, let's pick on something really obvious like Africa per se, and look at how does Africa, the shape of Africa, how might that have come from this plate right here? And we can even click on these things, and so that's the African plate. Okay, well, good. So now it's showing me that plate in red in the outline, and I can start to make a guess as to, okay, what pieces of Africa actually were shaped from what happened on that plate and what's happening now on that plate. And again, lessons and things in the book, and if you're interested, also I want to point out that I do have a website, a blog, I tweet regularly, and so all the little tidbits and interesting things that I find along the way in life, I'm sharing those with you. So thanks for joining me about context and setting, and I look forward to you at the next lesson.